nominee's fitness for the office. We should give the benefit of the doubt to the American people and protect the integrity of the Supreme Court. And there's Chuck Grassley walking down the hallway towards Dirksen 226. Other senators there coming in behind him.
Times highlighting that Judge Kavanaugh has undergone practice sessions in which advisors pretending to be senators hurled tough and sometimes even over-the-top unfair questions at him to help him figure out how he would respond and maintain his composure. The story adding that unlike his mock sessions before his first hearings, these practices have been kept to a smaller group of people. Alex in Wisconsin, Democrats line, hi.
Hi, I'm calling this morning because I think the end game of this nomination is to overturn Roe versus Wade, and I would like to remind the religious right and my Christian Republicans that the 10th commandment says, "Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's fertilized egg." And that's all I have to say. Thank you, sir.
Dana in California, Republican line.
Are you talking about me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to call and just let everybody know that there are women out there and men that lie and use these type of things to their advantage. In a marriage that I was in long ago, my wife used to call the cops on me and say that I was doing domestic violence when I wasn't, and I was arrested numerous times being innocent when they use that as a tool to use it against you. And these Democrats, women crying and all this stuff, that's a fake job. Our forefathers would be turning in their graves and puking about what is going on on the Capitol Hill now. That's all I got to say.
That was Dana in California. You're seeing Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona sitting there, a member of the Judiciary Committee, next to Ben Sasse, looks like, of Nebraska, as part of people filtering in for today's proceedings. Again, just about 30 seconds from now is the scheduled start of this hearing. As John has been telling you, there's no set time limit of when it will end, but you can follow along on C-SPANs 2 and 3. When the Senate comes in, you can follow along on C-SPAN 3. And again, if you go to our website, you can monitor it on cspan.org and our radio app. We leave you now to go to the House of Representatives.
The House will be in order. The chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., September 27th, 2018. I hereby appoint the Honorable Greg Harper to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, Paul D. Ryan, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to the order of the House of January 8, 2018, the Chair will now recognize members from lists submitted by the majority and minority leaders for morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate recognition between the parties. All time shall be equally allocated between the parties, and in no event shall debate continue beyond 11:50 a.m. Each member, other than the majority and minority leaders and the minority whip, shall be limited to 5 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Butterfield, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for yielding time this morning. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the life and work of Mrs. Sally Baldwin Howard, a great North Carolinian, a nationally recognized academic, and a dear family friend. At 102 years old, Mrs. Howard transitioned to her heavenly home on Tuesday, September 25, 2018. Our community in Wilson, North Carolina, has lost a giant and a friend. Mr. Speaker, Mrs. Sally Baldwin Howard was born on March 23, 1916, right in the midst of World War I, in Wilson, North Carolina, to Narcissus and Marcellus Sims. Even though I did not know Mr. Sims, I certainly knew Miss Narcissus Sims Townsend, who lived directly across the street from me as a child. Though she was raised in the Jim Crow South as the daughter of sharecroppers, Mrs. Howard graduated as valedictorian from Wilson Colored High School, later renamed Charles H. Darden High School in 1938, the same school that I graduated from in 1965. She attended Kittrell Junior College in Kittrell, North Carolina, before earning both a bachelor's and a master's degree in education from Hunter College in New York City. She also did extensive study at the New School of Social Research, as well as Columbia University. Mr. Speaker, Mrs. Howard taught for nearly 30 years as a first-grade teacher in New York City. While there, she worked in the New York City American Negro Theater, which helped launch the careers of the likes of Sidney Poitier, Harry Belafonte, Ossie Davis, Ruby Dee, and Esther Rolle. There, she honed her acting and directing and writing talent, finding her voice through her art. Mrs. Howard's off-Broadway play, The Passing of a Dinosaur, is still performed today in local schools. Upon her retirement, Mrs. Howard returned to her beloved Wilson, North Carolina, where she became an active member of St. John African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, which is a church that just celebrated its 150th anniversary this past weekend, and I had an opportunity to speak for that program. She led the Christian Education Department and the church honor roll to encourage academic excellence among the youth in her community. Along with many other projects, Mrs. Howard founded the Youth Enrichment Program with my good friend, Dr. Joanne Woodard, in 1989, focusing the program on lasting scholarship, a commitment to the cultural heritage of African Americans, and promoting the arts. Mrs. Howard's tireless work to enrich her community inspired Dr. Joanne Woodard to create the Sally B. Howard School for the Arts and Education in Wilson, naming the school in Mrs. Howard's honor. Established in 1997, the Sally B. Howard School for the Arts and Education is one of the first public charter schools in the state of North Carolina and the only charter school to open in Wilson County after legislation passed in 1997 to approve charter schools in our state. The school, along with the Youth Enrichment Program, has been an invaluable asset to our community. Mr. Speaker, the school's mission is to provide every child, privileged or underprivileged, the kind of education that nurtures students' gifts and talents and potential to become more than they ever thought they would be. At Sally B. Howard School, they prepare students for careers in the performing arts, science, and humanities. They are a school to behold. Established as an academic and as a writer, Mr. Speaker, and as a playwright, an avid traveler, and educator, Mrs. Howard used her vast array of talents and expertise to leave a lasting impact on thousands in our communities. 2 years ago, we had the awesome opportunity to celebrate Mrs. Sally B. Howard's 100th birthday, and this picture that I have with me today depicts that moment as I escorted her into the auditorium of the school. We will have very fond memories of that day when she reached 100 years old. Finally, beyond her academic contributions, what is more illuminating of Mrs. Howard's character was the way she connected with her students and her friends. She took a personal interest in the scholarship and mentorship of the youth that went far beyond success in the classroom. This is indeed a solemn occasion, but it's also an occasion to celebrate. At 102 years old, Mrs. Sally B. Howard fought the good fight, served her community, and was a friend and mentor to many. I am thankful to God that she was able to touch so many lives. May she rest in peace. She now belongs to the ages. I ask my colleagues to join me in celebrating the extraordinary life, work, and legacy of Sally Baldwin Howard. Thank you for the time this morning, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Thompson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, last week as I traveled the communities of my congressional district, I witnessed and saw firsthand the evidence of the Great American Comeback. The amount of jobs, the job growth that were available, the increase in wages, individuals who have left one job, what we call the churn for a new job, a better job, higher wages, The economic growth, just incredible, absolutely incredible, inspiring, the great American comeback. You know, since the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was passed last December, the results on our economy have been historic. The unemployment rate is at 3.9%, the lowest it's been in decades. Job openings are at a record high. 213,000 jobs were added in June alone in this great nation. And in June, there were 6.7 million job openings. Most recently reported, we're at 6.9 million job openings, marking the first time since 2000 there have been more job openings than those who are unemployed. Over the past 12 months, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has added more than 65,000 new jobs. I witnessed a lot of those in my visits to manufacturers and refineries and small businesses. Just incredible, this great American comeback. Now, after years of struggling to get ahead, American people are seeing more jobs, opportunity, and optimism. Optimism, Mr. Speaker, come back. Small business owners are reporting increased employment and higher wages at record levels. Main streets across America are thriving. People have more money in their paychecks, and the tax cuts are working for the middle class. Today and Friday, this House will vote on 3 bills and make the tax cuts permanent. Make the great American comeback permanent. We need to double down on this success and pass Tax Reform 2.0. Through the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we've doubled the standard deduction and lowered tax rates, which means that 90% of Americans are seeing more money in their paychecks this year. Plus, more than 4 million Americans at 642 companies see better wages, bonuses, expanded retirement options. In fact, more than half of small businesses have plans to expand and boost hiring or increase employee benefits. This is tremendous news for American families. Too many Americans have been living paycheck to paycheck and have been doing so for way too long. Stagnant wages, growing debt, and the inability to save have plagued so many. Tax Reform 2.0 will create and expand additional programs to help Americans save. For example, it creates a new savings account to offer a fully flexible savings tool that families can use at any time. It expands the 529 education savings accounts, and it creates a new baby savings program to help with the birth of a new child or an adoption. Mr. Speaker, I fundamentally believe that Americans should keep more of their hard-earned money. They deserve that. Thanks to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, Congress paved the way to create a tax system that is fair, simpler, and one that established an environment where our country can thrive. We worked hard to do that, and on Friday, we'll vote to make those tax cuts permanent. If you support higher wages, if you support lower unemployment, if you support more jobs, if you support bigger paychecks, if you support the American people, then you'll support Tax Reform 2.0. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Wasserman Schultz, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is my privilege to recognize the tremendous and meaningful work of Howard Simon, Executive Director of the ACLU of Florida. Mr. Simon is retiring this year following a distinguished career defending civil rights and civil liberties that lasted longer than that of any other ACLU leader in the country. Prior to his appointment as Executive Director of the Florida affiliate in 1997, Mr. Simon led the fight to defend civil rights and civil liberties in Michigan, where he served as ACLU Executive Director for 23 years. His 21 years at the ACLU of Florida make him the longest-serving ACLU Executive Director in the country, and his cumulative 44-year career as a state director is the longest in the ACLU's 98-year history. As a student at City College of New York in 1965, Mr. Simon joined fellow student leaders to travel to Selma, Alabama, to march for voting rights alongside Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. This experience started a decades-long career fighting for the rights guaranteed to all Americans under the United States Constitution. In his time as Executive Director at the ACLU of Florida, Mr. Simon oversaw landmark work defending the rights of LGBTQ Floridians, protecting immigrants, reforming our criminal justice system, protecting free speech, preserving women's health, and strengthening the right to vote. The rights that Floridians enjoy would not be the same without the tireless work of this champion of liberty. I am proud to call Howard Simon my dear friend, and I join my fellow Floridians in thanking him for his thoughtful and compassionate work to safeguard our civil liberties and for helping to make the United States a more perfect union for us all. Thank you. I yield back the balance of my time. And thank you.
The gentlewoman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Ross-Layton, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On October 2nd, the Dade County Farm Bureau is proud to honor Paul and Swanee Damari, an agricultural powerhouse couple hailing from our South Florida community. For more than 90 years, the Damari family has graced South Florida by providing some of the best quality produce our nation has to offer, so much, in fact, that they have earned the title of Mr. and Mrs. Tomato. But where some may know them for their tasty and nutritious products alone, others know them for their world-class philanthropy and public service. From protecting our beautiful botanical gardens to advocating for organizations like the Red Cross, Paul and Swanee continue to serve as an inspiration to all those who call our slice of paradise home. Mr. Speaker, I am honored to recognize this extraordinary couple, and I thank Paul and Swanee for their tireless work in our community. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the Alzheimer's Association 2018 Miami-Dade Walk to End Alzheimer's being held in my congressional district on November 3rd. According to the Alzheimer's Association, over 5.7 million Americans are battling this brutal condition, 200,000 of whom are under the age of 65. Moreover, this disease is the 6th leading cause of death in our nation, and sadly, Alzheimer's currently cannot be cured, cannot be prevented, cannot be slowed. That is why advocacy and awareness are paramount. Although scientific and medical advancements to fight the effects of dementia have made significant progress, we must not, we cannot rest. And that is why this walk is being held to remind us all that the struggle continues. Day after day, we must continue to raise our benchmark and ensure third for a good cause and participate in the Alzheimer's Association Miami-Dade Walk. Together, we can take the first step in a world without Alzheimer's. Mr. Speaker, I rise to recognize September as Alopecia Areata Awareness Month. Alopecia areata is an autoimmune disease resulting in the loss of hair on the body, affecting about 7 million Americans. Additionally, of the 7 million Americans battling alopecia, almost 15%, or just over 1 million, are under 12 years of age. This is because alopecia often presents itself at an early stage in life, with no warning and no prevention to be had. It appears on the skin, most often as one or more small, round, smooth patches of hair loss on the scalp, and can progress to total hair loss. My constituent, Deidre Nero, was first informed me of the effects and seriousness of alopecia. Deidre, who has alopecia, is a legislative liaison and secretary of the board for the National Alopecia Areata Foundation. Earlier this month, Deidre and her fellow NAAF participants were on Capitol Hill advocating on behalf of a bill, H.R. 2925, that is called legislation to provide coverage for wigs as durable medical equipment under the Medicare program. That bill title says it all. It's a common sense reform bill that will make a simple change to the definition of durable medical equipment under the Social Security Act to include cranial prosthetics, alleviating large out-of-pocket expenses for patients. Mr. Speaker, I am proud to have championed this cause during my time in Congress, and I'm thankful for the work that the National Alopecia Areata Foundation continues to do on behalf of all patients. Furthermore, I humbly ask colleagues on both sides of the aisle to join me in recognizing Alopecia Awareness Month and support this important legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from West Virginia, Mr. Jenkins, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been blessed these last 4 years to represent the people of West Virginia's 3rd Congressional District. But now, country roads are calling me home. My state is facing a crisis in our judicial system, and I believe back home is where I'm needed most to best serve the people of West Virginia. This Sunday, I will be stepping down from the People's House to serve as a justice beginning Monday on our state Supreme Court. We're proud West Virginians, always working to make sure the state we love is the very best it can be, and taking care of one another when times are tough. In Congress, I've tried to use that Mountain State can-do spirit to help West Virginians grow and prosper. Here are just a few examples. Helping newborn babies. We've worked to help the most innocent victims of the drug crisis, newborn babies exposed to drugs during pregnancy. The cry of a precious, tiny, suffering baby suffering through withdrawal is heartbreaking. We were able to cut through federal red tape and pass legislation signed by the president, facilitating and helping facilities like Lily's Place help children get a healthy start in life. Protecting minors' health care. Our government made a promise to our miners: you go into the bowels of the earth, mine the coal, and fuel our nation and forge the steel that won world wars, and we will guarantee you a secure health care benefit. We kept that promise, passing legislation protecting health care for our retirees and their widows. As go the roads, so go the jobs. As a member of the House Appropriations Committee, I helped fund the FAST Act, bringing $2.5 billion of funding just to West Virginia. Now we're fixing our roads and bridges and investing in water and sewer infrastructure, transitioning the West Virginia economy. We're bringing broadband to our state in rural parts.
Of course.
Growing more jobs. My motto is a good job solves a lot of problems. You can feel hope and opportunity returning to the hills of West Virginia. And in fact, our 2017 economic growth rate was one of the highest in the country. I'll never forget standing in the Oval Office with the hard-working coal miners as he signed the legislation I helped pass that saved 1/3 of all coal mining jobs in America. Coal trains are full again and paychecks are back in workers' pockets. This has truly been a team effort, and I want to thank the incredible staff for their hard work and dedication to our constituents. We've handled over 5,000 constituent service requests these last 4 years. We were able to help people like Wetzel Sanders, a true American hero. Wetzel was a corporal in the Army, was injured in the attack on Pearl Harbor. He took shrapnel to the knee, was bandaged, and went back into the fight. He's now 19.
Men will experience some form of sexual violence in their lifetime. According to the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, 60% of sexual assaults go unreported. In addition, I received a letter from a 60-year-old California constituent who told me that she survived an attempted rape at age 17. She described as being terrified and embarrassed. She never told a soul until much later in life. The assault stayed with her for 43 years. I think it's important to remember these realities as we hear from Dr. Ford about her experience. There's been a great deal of public discussion about the Me Too movement today versus the Year of the Woman almost 27 years ago. But while young women are standing up and saying no more, our institutions have not progressed in how they treat women who come forward. Too often, women's memories and credibility come under assault. In essence, they are put on trial, and forced to defend themselves, and often re-victimized in the process. 27 years ago, I was walking through an airport when I saw a large group of people gathered around a TV to listen to Anita Hill tell her story. What I saw was an attractive woman in a blue suit before an all-male Judiciary Committee, speaking of her experience of sexual harassment. She was treated badly, accused of lying, attacked, and her credibility put to the test throughout the process. Today, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford has come forward to tell her story of being assaulted and fearing for her life when she was a teenager. Initially, as I said, Dr. Ford did not want to make her story public. Then, within 36 hours of coming forward, Republicans scheduled a hearing without talking to her or even inviting her to testify. She was told she had to show up or the committee would move forward with a vote. It took a public outcry for the majority to back down and give her even a few days to come before the committee. Republicans also scheduled this hearing with Dr. Ford without having her allegations investigated by the FBI. In 1991, Anita Hill's allegations were reviewed by the FBI, as is the normal process and squarely within its jurisdiction. However, despite repeated requests, President Trump and the Republicans have refused to take this routine step and direct the FBI to conduct an impartial investigation. This would clearly be the best way to ensure a fair process to both Judge Kavanaugh and to Dr. Ford. In 1991, the Senate heard from 22 witnesses over 3 days. Today, while rejecting an FBI investigation, Republicans are refusing to hear testimony from any other witness, including Mark Judge, who Dr. Ford identified as being in the room when the attack took place. And we believe Judge should be subpoenaed so the committee can hear from him directly. Republicans have also refused to call anyone who could speak to the evidence that would support or refute Dr. Ford's claim, and not one witness who could address credibility and character of either Ford or Kavanaugh has been called. What I find most inexcusable is this rush to judgment, the unwillingness to take these kinds of allegations at face value and look at them for what they are, a real question of character for someone who is asking for a lifetime appointment on the Supreme Court. In 1991, Republicans belittled Professor Hill's experience, saying, and I quote, "It won't make a bit of difference in the outcome," end quote. And the burden of proof was on Professor Hill. Today, our Republican colleagues are saying this is a hiccup. Dr. Ford is mixed up and declaring, "I'll listen to the lady, but we're going to bring this to a close." What's worse, many of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have also made it clear that no matter what happens today, the Senate will plow right through and ensure Judge Kavanaugh would be elevated within a week. In fact, on Tuesday, the majority went ahead and scheduled a vote on the nomination before we heard one word of testimony regarding allegations of sexual assault and misconduct by Brett Kavanaugh. Republican leadership even told senators they should plan to be in over this weekend so the nomination can be pushed through without delay. This is despite the fact that in the last few days, 2 more women have come forward with their own serious allegations of sexual assault involving Brett Kavanaugh. This past Sunday, we learned about Debbie Ramirez, who was a student at Yale with Brett Kavanaugh. She, too, did not want to come forward, but after being approached by reporters, she told her story. She was at a college party where Kavanaugh exposed himself to her. She recalls pushing him away and then seeing him laughing and pulling his pants up. Then yesterday, Judy Swetnick came forward to say that she had experiences of being at house parties with Brett Kavanaugh and Mark Judge. She recounted seeing Kavanaugh engage, and I quote, in abusive and physically aggressive behavior toward girls, end quote, including attempts to, quote, remove or shift girls' clothing, end quote, not taking, quote, no for an answer, grabbing girls, quote, without their consent, end quote, and targeting, quote, particular girls so that they could be taken advantage of, end quote. Each of these stories are troubling on their own, and each of these allegations should be investigated by the FBI. All three women have said they would like the FBI to investigate. Please do so. All three have said they have other witnesses and evidence to corroborate their accounts. And yet Republicans continue to blindly push forward. So today we're moving forward with a hearing and being asked to assess the credibility of Brett Kavanaugh. He's made several statements about how his focus was on school, basketball, service projects, and going to church. He declared that he, quote, never, end quote, drank so much he couldn't remember what happened, and he has, quote, always treated women with dignity and respect, end quote. And while he has made these declarations, more and more people have come forward, challenging his characterization of events and behaviors. James Roach, his freshman roommate at Yale, stated Kavanaugh was, and I quote again, frequently, incoherently drunk, end quote. And that was when, quote, he became aggressive and belligerent, end quote, when he was drunk. Liz Swisher, a friend of his from Yale, said, and I quote, there's no medical way I can say that he was blacked out, but it's not credible for him to say that he has no memory lapses in the nights that he drank to excess, end quote. Lynn Brooks, a college classmate, said the picture Kavanaugh is trying to paint doesn't match her memories of him. And I quote, he's trying to paint himself as some kind of choir boy. You can't lie your way onto the Supreme Court. And with that statement out, he's gone too far. It's about the integrity of the institution, end quote. Ultimately, members and ladies and gentlemen, I really think that's the point. We're here to decide whether to evaluate this nominee to the most prestigious court in our country. It's about the integrity of that institution and the integrity of this institution. The entire country is watching how we handle these allegations. I hope the majority changes their tactics, opens their mind, and seriously reflects on why we are here. We are here for one reason, to determine whether Judge Kavanaugh should be elevated to one of the most powerful positions in our country. This is not a trial of Dr. Ford. It's a job interview for Judge Kavanaugh. Is Brett Kavanaugh who we want on the most prestigious court in our country? Is he the best we can do? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. I'm sorry you brought up about the unsubstantiated allegations of other people, because we're here for the sole purpose of listening to Dr. Ford, and we'll consider other issues other times. I would like to have you rise so I can swear you. Yeah, Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you very much. Please be seated. And before you give your statement, I want to say that to everybody that she has asked for anytime you ask for a break, you get a break. Anytime there's something that you need you don't have, just ask us. And you can have as much time for your opening statement as you want. Just generally let us know if there's any issues. Proceed, please.
Thank you, Senator Grassley. I think after I read my opening statement, I anticipate needing some caffeine, if that is available.
Okay. Can you pull the microphone just a little bit closer to you, please?
Okay.
Can the whole box go a little bit closer?
That's what I'm trying, Senator. No.
Okay. Well, then
I'll lean forward.
Thank you.
I could.
Thank you.
Okay. Is this good?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Grassley and Ranking Member Feinstein, members of the committee. My name is Christine Blasey Ford. I am a professor of psychology at Palo Alto University and a research psychologist at the Stanford University School of Medicine. I won't detail my educational background since it has already been summarized. I have been married to Russell Ford since 2002, and we have 2 children. I am here today not because I want to be. I am terrified. I am here because I believe it is my civic duty to tell you what happened to me while Brett Kavanaugh and I were in high school. I have described the events publicly before. I summarized them in my letter to Ranking Member Feinstein and again in a letter to Chairman Grassley. I understand and appreciate the importance of your hearing from me directly about what happened to me and the impact that it has had on my life and on my family. I grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. I attended the Holton Arms School in Bethesda, Maryland from 1978 to 1984. Holton Arms is an all-girls school that opened in 1901. During my time at the school, girls at Holton Arms frequently met and became friendly with boys from all-boys schools in the area, including the Landon School, Georgetown Prep, Gonzaga High School, as well as our country clubs and other places where kids and families socialized. This is how I met Brett Kavanaugh, the boy who sexually assaulted me. During my freshman and sophomore school years, when I was 14 and 15 years old, my group of friends intersected with Brett and his friends for a short period of time. I had been friendly with a classmate of Brett's for a short time during my freshman and sophomore year. And it was through that connection that I attended a number of parties that Brett also attended. We did not know each other well, but I knew him and he knew me. In the summer of 1982, like most summers, I spent most every day at the Columbia Country Club in Chevy Chase, Maryland, swimming and practicing diving. One evening that summer, after a day of diving at the club, I attended a small gathering at a house in the Bethesda area. There were 4 boys I remember specifically being at the house. Brett Kavanaugh. I do not remember all of the details of how that gathering came together, but like many that summer, it was almost surely a spur-of-the-moment gathering. I truly wish I could be more helpful with more detailed answers to all of the questions that have and will be asked about how I got to the party and where it took place and so forth. I don't have all the answers, and I don't remember as much as I would like to. But the details about that night that bring me here today are the ones I will never forget. They have been seared into my memory and have haunted me episodically as an adult. When I got to the small gathering, people were drinking beer in a small living room, family room type area on the first floor of the house. I drank 1 beer. Brett and Mark were visibly drunk. Early in the evening, I went up a very narrow set of stairs, leading from the living room to a second floor to use the restroom. When I got to the top of the stairs, I was pushed from behind into a bedroom across from the bathroom. I couldn't see who pushed me. Brett and Mark came into the bedroom and locked the door behind them. There was music playing in the bedroom. It was turned up louder by either Brett or Mark once we were in the room. I was pushed onto the bed, and Brett got on top of me. He began running his hands over my body and grinding into me. I yelled, hoping that someone downstairs might hear me, and I tried to get away from him, but his weight was heavy. Brett groped me and tried to take off my clothes. He had raped me. I tried to yell for help. When I did, Brett put his hand over my mouth to stop me from yelling. This is what terrified me the most and has had the most lasting impact on my life. It was hard for me to breathe, and I thought that Brett was accidentally going to kill me. Both Brett and Mark were drunkenly laughing during the attack. They seemed to be having a very good time. Mark seemed ambivalent, at times urging Brett on, and at times telling him to stop. A couple of times I made eye contact with Mark and thought he might try to help me, but he did not. During this assault, Mark came over and jumped on the bed twice while Brett was on top of me. And the last time that he did this, we toppled over and Brett was no longer on top of me. I was able to get up and run out of the room. Directly across from the bedroom was a small bathroom. I ran inside the bathroom and locked the door. I waited until I heard Brett and Mark leave the bedroom, laughing, and loudly walk down the narrow stairway, pinballing off the walls on the way down. I waited, and when I did not hear them come back up the stairs, I left the bathroom, went down the same stairwell, through the living room, and left the house. I remember being on the street and feeling an enormous sense of relief that I had escaped that house and that Brett and Mark were not coming outside after me. Brett's assault on me drastically altered my life. For a very long time, I was too afraid and ashamed to tell anyone these details. I did not want to tell my parents that I, at age 15, was in a house without any parents present, drinking beer with boys. I convinced myself that because Brett did not rape me, I should just move on and just pretend that it didn't happen. Over the years, I told very, very few friends that I had this traumatic experience. I told my husband before we were married that I had experienced a sexual assault. I had never told the details to anyone, the specific details, until May 2012 during a couples counseling session. The reason this came up in counseling is that my husband and I had completed a very extensive, very long remodel of our home, and I insisted on a second front door, an idea that he and others disagreed with and could not understand. In explaining why I wanted a second front door, I began to describe the assault in detail. I recall saying that the boy who assaulted me could someday be on the U.S. Supreme Court and spoke a bit about his background at an elitist all-boys school in Bethesda, Maryland. My husband recalls that I named my attacker as Brett Kavanaugh. After that May 2012 therapy session, I did my best to ignore the memories of the assault because recounting them caused me to relive the experience and caused panic and anxiety. Occasionally, I would discuss the assault in an individual therapy session, but talking about it caused more reliving of the trauma, so I tried not to think about it or discuss it. But over the years, I went through periods where I thought about the attack. I had confided in some close friends that I had had an experience with sexual assault. Occasionally, I stated that my assailant was a prominent lawyer or judge, but I did not use his name. I do not recall each person I spoke to about Brett's assault, and some friends have reminded me of these conversations since the publication of the Washington Post story on September 16, 2018. But until July 2018, I had never named Mr. Kavanaugh as my attacker outside of therapy. This changed in early July 2018. I saw press reports stating that Brett Kavanaugh was on the short list of a list of very well-qualified Supreme Court nominees. I thought it was my civic duty to relay the information I had about Mr. Kavanaugh's conduct so that those considering his nomination would know about this assault. On July 6th, I had a sense of urgency to relay the information to the Senate and the President as soon as possible before a nominee was selected. I did not know how specifically to do this. I called my congressional representative and let her receptionist know that someone on the President's shortlist had attacked me. I also sent a message to the encrypted Washington Post confidential tip line. I did not use my name, but I provided the names of Brett Kavanaugh and Mark Judge. I stated that Mr. Kavanaugh had assaulted me in the 1980s in Maryland. This was an extremely hard thing for me to do, but I felt that I couldn't not do it. Over the next 2 days, I told a couple of close friends on the beach in Aptos, California, that Mr. Kavanaugh had sexually assaulted me. I was very conflicted as to whether to speak out. On July 9th, I received a return phone call from the office of Congresswoman Anna Eshoo after Mr. Kavanaugh had become the nominee. I met with her staff on July 18th and with her on July 20th, describing the assault and discussing my fears about coming forward. Later, we discussed the possibility of sending a letter to Ranking Member Feinstein, who is one of my state's senators, describing what occurred. My understanding is that Representative Eshoo's office delivered a copy of my letter to Senator Feinstein's office on July 30th. The letter included my name, but also a request that it be kept confidential. My hope was that providing the information confidentially would be sufficient to allow the Senate to consider Mr. Kavanaugh's serious misconduct without having to make myself, my family, or anyone's family vulnerable to the personal attacks and invasions of privacy that we have faced since my name became public. In a letter dated August 31st, Senator Feinstein wrote that she would not share the letter without my explicit consent, and I appreciated this commitment. Sexual assault victims should be able to decide for themselves when and whether their private experience is made public. As the hearing date got closer, I struggled with a terrible choice. Do I share the facts with the Senate and put myself and my family in the public spotlight? Or do I preserve our privacy and allow the Senate to make its decision without knowing the full truth of his past behaviors? I agonized daily with this decision throughout August and September 2018. The sense of duty that originally motivated me to reach out confidentially to the Washington Post and to Anna Eshoo's office when there was still a list of extremely qualified candidates, and to Senator Feinstein was always there, but my fears of the consequences of speaking out started to exponentially increase. During August 2018, the press reported that Mr. Kavanaugh's confirmation was virtually certain. Persons painted him as a champion of women's rights and empowerment. And I believed that if I came forward, my single voice would be drowned out by a chorus of powerful supporters. By the time of the confirmation hearings, I had resigned myself to remaining quiet and letting the committee and the Senate make their decision without knowing what Mr. Kavanaugh had done to me. Once the press started reporting on the existence of the letter I had sent to Senator Feinstein, I faced mounting pressure. Reporters appeared at my home and at my workplace, demanding information about the letter in the presence of my graduate students. They called my bosses and coworkers and left me many messages, making it clear that my name would inevitably be released to the media. I decided to speak out publicly to a journalist who had originally responded to the tip I had sent to the Washington Post and who had gained my trust. It was important for me to describe the details of the assault in my own words. Since September 16th, the date of the Washington Post story, I have experienced an outpouring of support from people in every state of this country. Thousands and thousands of people who have had their lives dramatically altered by sexual violence have reached out to share their experience and have thanked me for coming forward. We have received tremendous support from our friends and our community. At the same time, my greatest fears have been realized, and the reality has been far worse than what I expected. My family and I have been the target of constant harassment and death threats, and I have been called the most vile and hateful names imaginable. These messages, while far fewer than the expressions of support, have been terrifying and have rocked me to my core. People have posted my personal information and that of my parents online on the internet. This has resulted in additional emails, calls, and threats. My family and I were forced to move out of our home. Since September 16th, my family and I have been visiting in various secure locales, at times separated and at times together, with the help of security guards. This past Tuesday evening, my work email was hacked and messages were sent out trying to recant my description of the sexual assault. Apart from the assault itself, these past couple of weeks have been the hardest of my life. I've had to relive this trauma in front of the world, and I've seen my life picked apart by people on television, on Twitter, other social media, other media, and in this body who have never met me or spoken with me. I have been accused of acting out of partisan political motives. Those who say that do not know me. I am an independent person and I am no one's pawn. My motivation in coming forward was to be helpful and to provide facts about how Mr. Kavanaugh's actions have damaged my life so that you could take into a serious consideration as you make your decision about how to proceed. It is not my responsibility to determine whether Mr. Kavanaugh deserves to sit on the Supreme Court. My responsibility is to tell you the truth. I understand that a professional prosecutor has been hired to ask me questions, and I'm committed to doing my very best to answer them. I have never been questioned by a prosecutor, and I will do my best. At the same time, because the committee members will be judging my credibility, I do hope to be able to engage directly with each of you. And at this point, I will do my best to answer your questions and would request some caffeine.
A Coke or something?
That sounds good. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I use my 5 minutes of questioning, I thought that I'd try to remind my colleagues, and in this case, Ms. Mitchell as well, that the 5 minutes, the way I traditionally have done, if you ask a question before your time runs out, and even though you go over your time, as long as you aren't filibustering, I'll let you ask your question, and I'm going to make sure that both Dr. Ford and Judge Kavanaugh, as chairman of the committee, I know that they're going to get a chance to answer the questions fully beyond that 5 minutes. But when either Dr. Ford or Judge Kavanaugh gets done, then we immediately go to the next person. So I hope that that will be done in a. Dr. Ford, I'm told that you want a break right now, and if you do, that's fine.
I'm okay. I got the coffee. Thank you very much. I think I can proceed and sip on the coffee.
Nobody can mix up my coffee right, so so you're pretty fortunate. So now, with that, Ms. Mitchell, you have my 5 minutes to ask questions.
Good morning, Dr. Ford.
Hi.
We haven't met. My name is Rachel Mitchell.
Nice to meet you.
I just wanted to tell you the first thing that struck me from your statement this morning was that you were terrified. And I just wanted to let you know I'm very sorry. That's not right. I know this is stressful, and so I would like to set forth some guidelines that maybe will alleviate that a little bit. If I ask you a question that you don't understand, please ask me to clarify it or ask it in a different way. When I ask questions, sometimes I'll refer back to other information you've provided. If I do that and I get it wrong, please correct me.
Okay.
I'm not going to ask you to guess. I know it was a long time ago. If you do estimate, please let me know that you're estimating, okay?
Fair.
Okay. We've put before you, and I'm sure you have copies of them anyway, 5 pieces of information, and I wanted to go over them. The first is a screenshot of a WhatsApp texting between you and somebody at the Washington Post. Do you have that in front of you?
Yes.
The first 2 texts were sent by you on July 6th. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then the last one sent by you was on July 10th?
Correct.
Okay. Are those 3 comments accurate?
I will read them, yes.
Take your time.
So there's one correction.
Okay.
I've misused the word bystander as an adjective.
Okay.
Bystander means someone that is looking at an assault, and the person named PJ was not technically a bystander. I was writing very quickly with a sense of urgency, so I would not call him a bystander. He was downstairs, and what I remember of him was he was a tall and very nice person. I didn't know him well, but that he was downstairs, not anywhere near the event.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'd like to take that word out if it's possible.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. The second is the letter that you wrote to Senator Feinstein dated the July 30th of this year.
Yes.
Did you write the letter yourself?
I did.
And since it's dated July 30th, did you write it on that date?
I believe so. It sounds right. I was in Rehoboth, Delaware at the time. I could look into my calendar and try to figure that out.
Was it written on or about that date?
Yes, yes. I traveled, I think, the 26th of July to Rehoboth, Delaware. So that makes sense because I wrote it from there.
Okay. Is the letter accurate?
I'll take a minute to read it. So I can read fast.
Take your time.
Okay. Okay, so I have 3 areas that I'd like to address.
Okay.
In the second paragraph, where it says the assault occurred in a suburban Maryland area home.
Yes.
At a gathering that included me and 4 others. I can't guarantee that there weren't a few other people there, but they are not in my purview of my memory.
Would it be fair to say there were at least 4 others?
Yes.
Okay. What's the second correction?
Oh, okay. The next sentence begins with Kavanaugh physically pushed me into the bedroom. I would say I can't promise that Mark Judge didn't assist with that. I don't know. It was pushed from behind, so I don't want to put that solely on him.
Okay.
Okay.
Ms. Mitchell, I don't know whether this is fair for me to interrupt, but I want to keep people within 5 minutes. Is that a major problem for you in the middle of a question? Because I've got to treat everybody the same.
I understand that.
Can I go to Senator Feinstein, or you?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, I didn't see the light was red. Please
Senator
do.
Feinstein.
I didn't get to.
So we're going to come back to that
Oh,
when
okay.
she comes back.
I
so
see.
Just make it,
I see. Okay.
Fast.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. When she comes through, after Feinstein is done, she'll come back and she'll ask you about the other two things. So we'll get back.
For the benefit of Dr. Ford, I think she'll continue that after the 5 minutes here.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to begin by putting some letters in the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you.
If you want to tell me.
140 letters from friends and neighbors of the witness and 1,000 female physicians across the country. Those are what the letters are.
Don't look at this.
I want to thank you very much for your testimony. I know how very, very hard it is. Why have you held it to yourself all these years? As you look back, can you indicate what the reasons are?
Well, I haven't held it in all these years. I did disclose it in the confines of therapy, where I felt like it was an appropriate place to cope with the sequelae of the event.
Well, can you tell us what impact the events had on you?
Well, I think that the sequelae of sexual assault varies by person. So for me personally, anxiety, phobia, and PTSD-like symptoms are the types of things that I've been coping with. So more specifically, claustrophobia, panic, and that type of thing.
Is that the reason for the front door?
Correct.
Is claustrophobia?
Correct. It doesn't. Our house does not look aesthetically pleasing from the curb.
I see. And do you have that second front door?
Yes.
Yes.
It now is a place to host Google interns because we live near Google, so we get to have, and other students can live.
Can you tell us, is there any other way this has affected your life?
The primary impact was in the initial 4 years after the event. I struggled academically. I struggled very much in Chapel Hill and in college. When I was 17 and went off to college, I had a very hard time, more so than others, forming new friendships and especially friendships with boys. And I had academic problems.
What were the when we spoke, and it became very clear how deeply you felt about this and the need that you wanted to remain confidential. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So I was watching carefully throughout the summer. Well, my original intent, I just want to remind, was to communicate with everyone when there was still a list of candidates who all seemed to be, just from my perspective, from what I could read, equally qualified. And I was in a hurry to try to get the information forward, but didn't quite know how to do that. However, once he was selected and it seemed like he was popular and that it was a sure vote, I was calculating daily the risk-benefit for me of coming forward and wondering whether I would just be jumping in front of a train that was headed to where it was headed anyway, and that I would just be personally annihilated.
How did you decide to come forward?
Ultimately, because reporters were sitting outside of my home and trying to talk to my dog through the window to calm the dog down, and a reporter appeared in my graduate classroom, and I mistook her for a student, and she came up to ask me a question, and I thought that she was a student, and it turned out that she was a reporter. So at that point, I felt like enough was enough. People were calling my colleagues at Stanford and leaving messages on their voicemails and on their email saying that they knew my name. Clearly, people knew my address because they were out in front of my house. And it just, the mounting pressure, it seemed like it was time to just say what I needed to say.
I'm sorry. I want to ask you one question about the attack itself. You are very clear about the attack, being pushed into the room. You say you don't know quite by whom, but that it was Brett Kavanaugh that covered your mouth to prevent you from screaming, and then you escaped. How are you so sure that it was he?
The same way that I'm sure that I'm talking to you right now. It's just basic memory functions, and also just the level of norepinephrine and epinephrine in the brain that sort of, as you know, encodes, that neurotransmitter encodes memories into the hippocampus, and so the trauma-related experience then is kind of locked there, whereas other details kind of drift.
So what you are telling us is this could not be a case of mistaken identity?
Absolutely not.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Mitchell for Senator Hatch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When we were stopped, you were going to tell us a third correction that you wanted to make on that statement, or I'm sorry, the letter to Senator Feinstein.
It wasn't a correction, but I just wanted to comment on it since we were looking at this letter, that I did see Mark Judge once at the Potomac Village Safeway after the time of the attack, and it would be helpful with anyone's resources to figure out when he worked there. If people are wanting more details from me about when the attack occurred, if we could find out when he worked there, then I could provide a more detailed timeline as to when the attack occurred.
Okay, and that is not a correction in your statement.
It's just no.
Okay. You also wrote out a handwritten statement for the polygrapher when you took your polygraph test. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I see corrections on that where you crossed out. So I will go on to the Washington Post article that was originally published on September 16th of this year.
And should I just not look at this for accuracy, or we're just going to leave that be?
We may come back to it if you need to refer to it.
Okay.
On the Washington Post article, did you submit to an interview by a reporter with the Washington Post for that article to be written?
Correct.
Okay. And then finally was the statement that you provided this morning. I assume that to the best of your recollection that was accurate.
That this whole article is accurate?
No. The statement that you made this morning.
Yes.
Okay. I want to talk to you about the day that this happened leading up to the gathering.
Okay.
In your statement this morning, have you told us everything that you remember about the day leading up to that?
Yes.
Let me ask just a few questions to make sure that you've thought of everything, okay? You indicated that you were at the country club swimming that day?
That's my best estimate of how this could have happened.
Okay. And when you say best estimate, is that based on the fact that you said you went there pretty much every day? Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall prior to getting there, so I'm only talking about up to the gathering, had you had anything to drink?
Not at all.
Okay. Were you on any sort of medication?
None.
Okay. Do you recall knowing before you went who was going to be at that gathering?
I recall that expecting that Mark Judge and Leland would be at that gathering.
Okay. Do you recall an expectation that Brett Kavanaugh would be there?
I don't recall whether or not I expected that.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the gathering up from the time you arrived till when you went up the stairs, just that period of time, okay? What was the atmosphere like at the gathering?
Mr. Kavanaugh and Mr. Judge were extremely inebriated. They had clearly been drinking prior, and the other people at the party were not. The living room was...
Can I ask you just to follow up on that? When you said it was clear that they had been drinking prior, do you mean prior to the time you had gotten there or prior to the time they had arrived?
Prior to the time that they arrived. I don't recall who arrived first, though, whether it was me or them.
Okay. Please continue.
Okay. So I recall that I can sketch a floor plan. I recall that it was a sparsely furnished, fairly modest living room, and it was not really a party, like the news has made it sound. It was not. It was just a gathering that I assumed was going to lead to a party later on that those boys would attend, because they tended to have parties later at night than I was allowed to stay out. So it was kind of a pre-gathering.
Was it loud?
No, not in the living room.
Besides the music that you've described that was playing in the bedroom, was there any other music or television or anything like that that was adding?
No.
Okay. So there wasn't a stereo playing downstairs?
No.
Okay.
Senator Leahy.
Dr. Ford, thank you for being here. Mr. Chairman, you know, the way to make this inquiry truly credible is to do what we've always done when new information about a nominee comes to light. To use your words this morning, you want to reach the truth. The easy way to do that, ask the FBI to investigate. This is what we've always done. Let them investigate, report back to us. The same applies to the serious allegations made by Deborah Ramirez and Julie Swetnick. Let's have a nonpartisan professional investigation, and then take the time to have these witnesses testify. Chairman, you and I were both here 27 years ago. At that time, the Senate failed Anita Hill. I said I believed her, but I'm concerned that we're doing a lot less for these three women today. That's my personal view. Now, Dr. Ford, no matter what happens with this hearing today, no matter what happens with this nomination, I know, and I hear from so many in my own state of Vermont, there are millions of victims and survivors out there, and you sharing your story is going to have a lasting, positive impact on so many survivors in our country. We owe you a debt of gratitude for that, Doctor. Now, some senators have suggested you were simply mixed up about who assaulted you. An ally of Judge Kavanaugh in the White House even promoted a wild theory about a Kavanaugh lookalike. You immediately rejected that theory, and I ask consent to enter that in the record. Without objection. Now, how did you know Brett Kavanaugh and Mark Judge? And is it possible that you would mix them up with somebody else?
No, it is not. And the person that was blamed for the incident is actually the person who introduced me to them originally. So he was a member of Columbia Country Club, and I don't want to talk about him because I think it's unfair, but he is the person that introduced me to them.
But you would not mix up somebody else with Brett Kavanaugh, is that correct?
Correct.
Or Mark Judge?
Correct.
Well, then let's go back to the incident. What is the strongest memory you have? The strongest memory of the incident, something that you cannot forget. Take whatever time you need.
indelible in the hippocampus is the laughter, the uproarious laughter between the two, and they're having fun at my expense.
You've never forgotten that laughter. You've never forgotten them laughing at you.
They were laughing with each other.
And you were the object of the laughter?
I was, underneath one of them while the two laughed. Two friends having a really good time with one another.
Let me enter into the record a statement by the National Task Force to End Domestic Violence.
Without objection, so ordered.
And a letter from 24 members of the House of Representatives urging the committee to use the NTF's trauma-informed approach in questioning Dr. Ford.
Without objection, so ordered.
And a letter from another 116 members of the House asking to delay till all this has been heard.
Without objection, so ordered.
And Dr. Ford has at times been criticized for what she doesn't remember from 36 years ago. But we have numerous experts, including a study by the U.S. Army Military Police School Behavior Sciences Education, that lapses of memory are wholly consistent with severe trauma and stress of assault. I'd ask consent that be entered.
Without objection, so ordered.
And Dr. Ford, I'll just conclude with this. You do remember what happened, do you not?
Very much so.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Now, Ms. Mitchell for Senator Graham, and then it's my understanding that that's where you'd like to take a break.
Does that work for you? Does that work for you as well?
We're here to accommodate you, not you accommodate us.
I'm used to being collegial. So.
Okay, go ahead. Ms. Mitchell for Senator Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You told Senator Feinstein in your letter that you and 4 others were present. You've corrected that today to say it was at least 4 others. When you were interviewed by the Washington Post, you said that there were 4 boys present at the party. And then in your polygraph statement, you say there were 4 boys and 2 girls. When you say 2 girls, was that you and another, or was that 2 other girls?
That was me and 1 other girl.
And that other girl's name?
Leland.
Leland Kaiser now?
Correct.
Okay. So then would it be fair to say at least PJ, Brett Kavanaugh, Mark Judge, Leland Ingram at the time, and yourself were present, and possibly others?
And one other boy. So there were 4 boys. I just don't know the name of the other boy. So.
Have you been contacted by anybody saying, hey, I was at that party too?
No, I haven't talked with anyone from that party.
Okay. Now, you've been detailed about what happened once you got up the stairs, and so I don't need to go through that again. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just realized that I said something that was inaccurate. I said I hadn't spoken with anyone from the party since that. I've spoken with Leland.
Okay. Thank you for correcting that. I appreciate that. You've gone into detail about what happened once you went up the stairs, so I don't feel like it's necessary to go over those things again.
Okay. Thank you.
Have you told us everything that you do remember about it?
I believe so, but if there are other questions, I can attempt to answer them.
Okay. You said that the music was solely coming from that room. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And it was turned up once the 3 of you were inside that room. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. At some point, do you recall it being turned down?
I don't remember if it was turned down once I was leaving the house. I don't remember.
Okay.
Likely, since I could hear them walking down the stairs very clearly from the bathroom.
Okay. And the bathroom door was closed when you heard this. Is that correct?
I could hear them very clearly hitting the walls, going down the stairwell.
In fact, in your letter, you said that they went down the stairs and they were talking with other people in the house.
Correct.
Were you able to hear that conversation?
I was not able to hear that conversation, but I was aware that they were downstairs and that I would have to walk past them to get out of the house.
Okay. Now, let me make sure we're on the same page. Were you not able to hear the conversation or not able to understand the conversation?
I couldn't hear the conversation. I was upstairs.
Okay. How do you know there was a conversation?
I'm just assuming since it was a social gathering, people were talking. I don't know.
Okay. In your letter,
I heard them talking as they went down the stairwell. They were laughing and.
Okay. In your letter, you wrote both loudly stumbled down the stairwell, at which point other persons at the house were talking with them. Does that ring a bell?
Yes, I had to walk past everyone to leave the house. So.
Okay.
Your letter. I'm not understanding. I'm sorry.
Okay. Your next sentence, let me try to clarify this. After you said other persons at the house were talking with them, the letter goes on with the very next sentence. I exited the bathroom, ran outside of the house, and went home.
Correct.
Okay. You said that you do not remember how you got home. Is that correct?
I do not remember.
Okay.
Other than I did not drive home.
Okay. I'm going to show you, if somebody could provide to you a map of the various people's houses at the time, and if you could verify that this is where you were living at the time.
Where I was living at the time?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, do we have a copy of these documents?
We do not have a copy, but if you want one, we can get you one.
Yes, before the questions begin, so we can follow the testimony.
Okay. My staff says that we should not provide the copy.
No, we will provide the copy. We will provide the copy.
Well, speak plainly with me, please.
Oh, sure. I'd like to see what she's looking at.
Yeah, you have another 30 seconds now because I was rudely interrupted.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, Senator Harris, we do have a blown up copy of this for the members to view, if that's helpful.
Okay, I'm going to put check marks next to homes that I can confirm are the correct locations, and then an X or a question mark when I don't know where these people live.
I'm only asking you to confirm if that map accurately shows where you were living at the time.
Where I lived at the time. So I can't see the street name, but I'm happy to refer to the address or the neighborhood.
Okay, could you tell us that?
Yes, it's River Falls.
Okay.
It's near the, what is the place called? The Naval Research Center on Clara Barton Parkway.
Okay, was that a house or an apartment?
It was at my parents' home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Durbin.
Mr. Chairman, I ask consent to enter into colleagues, students, and mentors, 1,400 women and men who attended D.C. schools, and 50 members of the Yale Law School faculty who are calling for a full FBI investigation. I ask consent to enter these into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Dr. Ford, as difficult as this experience must be, I want you to know that your courage in coming forward has given countless Americans the strength to face their own life-shattering past and to begin to heal their wounds. By example, you have brought many families into an honest and sometimes painful dialogue that should have occurred a long time ago. I'm sorry for what this has done to you and your family. No one should face harassment, death threats, and disparaging comments by cheap-shot politicians simply for telling the truth. But you and your family should know that for every scurrilous charge and every pathetic tweet, there have been thousands of Americans, women and men, who believe you, support you, and thank you for your courage. Watching your experience, it's no wonder that many sexual assault survivors hide their past and spend their lives suffering in pain silence. You had absolutely nothing to gain by bringing these facts to the Senate Judiciary Committee. The fact that you are testifying here today, terrified though you may be, the fact that you have called for an FBI investigation of this incident, the fact that you are prepared to name both Judge Kavanaugh and eyewitness Mark Judge stands in sharp contrast to the obstruction we've seen on the other side. The FBI should have investigated your charges as they did in the Anita Hill hearing, but they did not. Mark Judge should be subpoenaed from his Bethany Beach hideaway and required to testify under oath, but he has not. Judge Kavanaugh, if he truly believes there's no evidence, no witnesses that can prove your case, should be joining us in demanding a thorough FBI investigation, but he has not. Today, you come before this committee and before this nation alone. I know you're joined by counsel and family. The prosecutor on the Republican side will continue to ask questions to test your memory and veracity. After spending decades trying to forget that awful night, it's no wonder your recollection is less than perfect. A polished liar can create a seamless story, but a trauma survivor cannot be expected to remember every painful detail. That's what Senator Leahy has mentioned earlier. One question is critical. In Judge Kavanaugh's opening testimony, which we will hear after you leave, this is what he says. I never had any sexual or physical encounter of any kind with Dr. Ford. I am not questioning that Dr. Ford may have been sexually assaulted by some person in some place at some time. Last night, the Republican staff of this committee released to the media a timeline that shows that they've interviewed 2 people who claim they were the ones who actually assaulted you. I'm asking you to address this new defense of mistaken identity directly. Dr. Ford, with what degree of certainty do you believe Brett Kavanaugh assaulted you?
100%.
100%. In the letter which you sent to Senator Feinstein, you wrote, I have not knowingly seen Kavanaugh since the assault. I did see Mark Judge once at the Potomac Village Safeway, where he was extremely uncomfortable in seeing me. Would you please describe that encounter at the Safeway with Mark Judge and what led you to believe he was uncomfortable?
Yes, I was going to the Potomac Village Safeway. This is the one on the corner of Falls and River Road. And I was with my mother, and I was a teenager, so I wanted her to go in one door and me go in the other. So I chose the wrong door because the door I chose was the one where Mark Judge was, looked like he was working there and arranging the shopping carts. And I said hello to him. And his face was white and very uncomfortable saying hello back. And we had previously been friendly at the times that we saw each other over the previous 2 years, albeit not very many times. We had always been friendly with one another. I wouldn't characterize him as not friendly. He was just nervous and not really wanting to speak with me. And he looked a little bit ill.
How long did this occur after the incident?
I would estimate 6 to 8 weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Before we take a break, I can't let what Senator Durbin said. By the way, he's my friend. We work on a lot of legislation together. But you talked about the obstruction from the other side. I cannot let it go by what you've heard me say so many times, that between July 30th and September 13th, there were 45 days this committee could have been investigating this situation, and her privacy would have been protected. So something happened here in between on your side that the whole country, well, not the whole country should have known about it. No, not know about it. We should have investigated it. We'll take a break now for 15 minutes.
California Senator Dianne Feinstein, the ranking Democrat, and Senator Hirano of Hawaii, a Democratic member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, during this 15-minute break. We are live inside 226 of the Dirksen Senate Office Building. It's a smaller room than the Hart Building next door, where the confirmation hearings originally were held for Judge Brett Kavanaugh. As we watch this scene with two members, Democratic members of the Judiciary Committee, a reminder, we'll use this opportunity to hear from you, to get your reaction. Our phone lines are open at 202-748-8920. That's our line for Democrats, and 202-748-8921 for Republicans. If you're an independent, 202-748-8922. C-SPAN is the pool. The cameras inside that room are our cameras as we provide coverage of this hearing. And next door in the Hart Senate Office Building, supporters and opponents of Brett Kavanaugh are also gathered in the room. You also see on the screen Sheldon Whitehouse, Democratic senator from Rhode Island. We're going to watch the scene for just a moment, get your reaction. The gavel will come back in about 12 to 15 minutes for another round of questioning to Christine Blasey Ford.
$11:30 now. $1 billion. And supporting rapists and their ability to hold a high honor unfortunately. All right, but thank you so much.
Members of the Senate Judiciary Committee in rooms adjoining 226 of the Dirksen Senate Office Building, and Dr. Christine Blasey Ford taking a short break during the proceedings. We'll continue live here on the C-SPAN networks and on C-SPAN Radio. A reminder, all of it available on our website at cspan.org. And from her opening statement, a portion of what Dr. Ford told the committee.
I am here today not because I want to be. I am terrified. I am here because I believe it is my civic duty to tell you what happened to me while Brett Kavanaugh and I were in high school. I have described the events publicly before. I summarized them in my letter to Ranking Member Feinstein and again in a letter to Chairman Grassley. I understand and appreciate the importance of your hearing from me directly about what happened to me and the impact that it has had on my life and on my family. I grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. I attended the Holton Arms School in Bethesda, Maryland from 1978 to 1984. Holton Arms is an all-girls school that opened in 1901. During my time at the school, girls at Holton Arms frequently met and became friendly with boys from all-boys schools in the area, including the Landon School, Georgetown Prep, Gonzaga High School. as well as our country clubs and other places where kids and families socialized. This is how I met Brett Kavanaugh, the boy who sexually assaulted me. During my freshman and sophomore school years,
it doesn't bother me.
when I was 14 and 15 years old,
my
group of friends intersected with Brett and his friends for a short period of time. I had been friendly with a classmate of Brett's for a short time during my freshman and sophomore year. And it was through that connection that I attended a number of parties that Brett also attended. We did not know each other well, but I knew him and he knew me. In the summer of 1982, like most summers, I spent most every day at the Columbia Country Club in Chevy Chase, Maryland, swimming and practicing diving. One evening that summer, after a day of diving at the club, I attended a small gathering at a house in the Bethesda area. There were 4 boys I remember specifically being at the house: Brett Kavanaugh, Mark Judge, a boy named PJ, and one other boy whose name I cannot recall. I also remember my friend Leland attending. I do not remember all of the details of how that gathering came together, but like many that summer, it was almost surely a spur-of-the-moment gathering. I truly wish I could be more helpful with more detailed answers to all of the questions that have and will be asked about how I got to the party and where it took place and so forth. I don't have all the answers, and I don't remember as much as I would like to. But the details about that night that bring me here today are the ones I will never forget. They have been seared into my memory and have haunted me episodically as an adult. When I got to the small gathering, people were drinking beer in a small living room, family room type area on the first floor of the house. I drank 1 beer. Brett and Mark were visibly drunk. Early in the evening, I went up a very narrow set of stairs leading from the living room to a second floor to use the restroom. When I got to the top of the stairs, I was pushed from behind into a bedroom across from the bathroom. I couldn't see who pushed me. Brett and Mark came into the bedroom and locked the door behind them. There was music playing in the bedroom. It was turned up louder by either Brett or Mark once we were in the room. I was pushed onto the bed, and Brett got on top of me. He began running his hands over my body and grinding into me. I yelled, hoping that someone downstairs might hear me, and I tried to get away from him, but his weight was heavy. Brett groped me and tried to take off my clothes. He had a hard time because he was very inebriated and because I was wearing a 1-piece bathing suit underneath my clothing. I believed he was going to rape me. I tried to yell for help. When I did, Brett put his hand over my mouth to stop me from yelling. This is what terrified me the most and has had the most lasting impact on my life. It was hard for me to breathe, and I thought that Brett was accidentally going to kill me. Both Brett and Mark were drunkenly laughing during the attack. They seemed to be having a very good time. Mark seemed ambivalent, at times urging Brett on, and at times telling him to stop. A couple of times I made eye contact with Mark and thought he might try to help me, but he did not. During this assault, Mark came over and jumped on the bed twice while Brett was on top of me. And the last time that he did this, we toppled over and Brett was no longer on top of me. I was able to get up and run out of the room. Directly across from the bedroom was a small bathroom. I ran inside the bathroom and locked the door. I waited until I heard Brett and Mark leave the bedroom, laughing, and loudly walk down the narrow stairway, pinballing off the walls on the way down. I waited, and when I did not hear them come back up the stairs, I left the bathroom, went down the same stairwell, through the living room, and left the house. I remember being on the street and feeling an enormous sense of relief that I had escaped that house and that Brett and Mark were not coming outside after me.
A portion of the opening statement by Dr. Christine Blasey Ford inside the Dirksen Senate Office Building, and we're also in the Hart Building, which adjoins the Dirksen Building, where protesters and supporters of Judge Kavanaugh have gathered. These are live view pictures. As we watch that scene, we want to get your reaction during this 15-minute break. First, from Princeton, Indiana, James on the Independent line. Good morning.
Good morning. How you doing?
We're fine. Your reaction to what you've heard so far?
So far, if you want the truth about it, she's lying like a dog.
Why so?
I'm not a big Trump supporter at all. By no means.
But why do you say she's lying?
Let's see. She's got so much inconsistency in her statements that you can drive a Mack truck through.
So name one. What one inconsistency stands out in your mind?
She can't remember that. She can't remember. It's automatically. It's like, I wish that dang prosecutor would say, listen, I need more than 5 minutes, and I could take her to the woodshed.
We'll go to Tracy, Riverton, Wyoming, Republican line. Good morning. Your reaction to the opening round of questioning?
Oh, I think it's just horrid.
Let me stop you, Tracy. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand is speaking to reporters. Let's listen in.
The worst moments of her life is extraordinary. I think her testimony is incredibly heartfelt, honest, deliberative, and effective. And I don't know how any of my Republican colleagues could, after hearing her tell her story, could not only not believe her, but could possibly vote for Brett Kavanaugh.
When you think of the setup of this hearing,
I think this setup is outrageous. I think it's unfair. I think the fact that my Republican colleagues don't feel they can do their own job by asking those questions, I think is unfair. I think to have a prosecutor asking the question as if she's on trial is also outrageous. So I think it's set up to be a limited hearing of he said, she said, which is not designed to get to the facts or to get to the truth of the matter.
Do you find her believable?
I do. I believe her.
Thank you, guys.
Senator Gillibrand and Tracy, I apologize. A lot of moving parts. We want to hear from some of the key players, but we also want to hear from you. Go ahead.
Yes, I just feel that she is very scripted. It's like she's really putting on an act. All her inconsistencies and whatnot, you can just tell she's lying.
We'll go to Brenda, Valley Park, Missouri, Democrats line.
Yes, I'm a 76-year-old woman who was sexually molested in the 2nd grade. This brings back so much pain. I thought I was over it, but it's not. You will never forget it. You get confused and you don't understand it, but you never forget what happened to you. Without my family, I would never have been able to go through this. And now I'm 76 years old, and I thought I was over it until I heard that it happened to someone else, and it is such a shame.
Brenda, how old were you at the time?
I was in the 2nd grade. And it was a 7th grader at my school. And, you know, on rainy days, they have you march around the school back then because they couldn't let you out. And I would see him, and I would get so upset. I've had a weight problem my whole life because I was so afraid that someone was going to hurt me. And I'm married. I have a wonderful family. I have a wonderful husband and a child and great-grandchildren and grandchildren, and I thought I was over this, and I have not brought this up for years until I heard this testimony, and it is just breaking my heart.
Brenda, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your story. We're going to go back to the Hart Senate Office Building. Senator Jeff Merkley.
Across this separation of powers, the President is supposed to nominate, the Senate is supposed to evaluate the record of the nominee. He's reached out to block with presidential privilege or executive privilege vast amounts of documents relevant to Kavanaugh's opinions, experience, and life. This, to our knowledge, has never happened before. The executive branch is not supposed to be able to compromise the role of the Senate in reviewing the record. So that is why I filed suit yesterday to say this extraordinary violation of our Constitution means that absolutely the procedure should be blocked until the Senate has full access to Kavanaugh's entire record so we can evaluate it in fulfilling our constitutional responsibility. So I hope it's on unprecedented and untested grounds, but I think it's important to call attention to this enormous violation. So I want to thank you all as being here as citizens, because really what's going on here is a battle between government by and for the powerful, the 1%, which is everything Kavanaugh represents, and government by and for the people, for the consumers, for the workers, and for the women of America. So, you're welcome. Thank you all for being here, bringing your feet on the street, your voices to demand fairness. Fairness to the women who are bringing their experiences forward, fairness in terms of the Senate appropriately evaluating nominee Kavanaugh's background.
Senator, does Vice President Biden's statement about FBI investigations diminish your argument?
I'm not familiar with his statement.
Come on, it's been all over the news. He said FBI investigations into candidates like Judge Kavanaugh mean nothing.
I would simply have just my own opinion, which is that when Dr. Ford says she would like the FBI to look into the details because she has nothing to hide, she's telling the authentic and true story, I think that's powerful, and I think it's been a tradition. In fact, just moments ago, as I was leaving a room, I heard Senator Leahy referring to the fact that such a follow-up background work by the FBI is standard procedure, and that standard procedure is being violated. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Mark Lee.
So you have a sense of what it looks like inside the Hart Senate Office Building and now inside the Dirksen Senate Office Building, 226, the Senate Judiciary Committee. And by the way, Senator Merkley, Democrat of Oregon, referring to a federal injunction that he has filed to stop a final vote on the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court. The short break is just about over. Christine Blasey Ford will be re-entering the room, and another round of questioning. Our live coverage continues here on the C-SPAN networks.
Dr. Ford, let me ask you a process question here. We were going to schedule a break for 12:05. This last break came just a little bit later. I didn't call it at the right time. We're going to have a vote at 12:40. So would it be possible for you to go from now until 12:40 without a break? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Now it is Senator Cornyn's time. So proceed, Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you, Senator. I have a blow up here to my right of the map that was shown to you. The address that's indicated on here as belonging to your family is what all the property tax records showed as being your address.
Okay.
Just to put it in perspective, I'd like to show you a further out, zoomed out picture so that we can put it in perspective.
Okay.
So we can show the greater Washington area. Of course, you can see the Beltway on that, the Beltway area.
Okay.
And then number 3, if we could look at that. We drew a 1-mile radius around the country club, and then we calculated from the furthest point.
Mr. Chairman, again, we don't have these documents.
No, we're not. That's why she showed 3 different documents, because they depict 3 different things. So we'd like to see all 3 documents, please, so we can follow along.
Proceed, please.
Okay. Looking at the third thing here, we calculated the distance from the closest point to your house from a mile radius of the country club, and then the farthest point. You can see it's 6.2 and, of course, 8.2 miles. And you've described this as being near the country club, wherever this house was. Is that right?
I would describe it as somewhere between my house and the country club, in that vicinity that's shown in your picture.
Okay.
And the country club is about a 20-minute drive from my parents' home.
A 20-minute drive, and of course I've marked as the crow flies.
Yes.
Would it be fair to say that somebody drove you somewhere, either to the party or home from the party?
Correct.
Okay. Has anyone come forward to say to you, hey, remember, I was the one that drove you home?
No.
Okay. In your July 6th text to the Washington Post that you looked at earlier, you said that this happened in the mid-'80s. Mm-hmm. In your letter to Senator Feinstein, you said it occurred in the early 80s. Mm-hmm. In your polygraph statement, you said it was high school summer in 80s, and you actually had written in, and this is one of the corrections I referred to, early, and then you crossed that out. Later in your interview with the Washington Post, you were more specific. You believed it occurred in the summer of 1982, and you said the end of your sophomore year.
Yes.
You said the same thing, I believe, in your prepared statement. How were you able to narrow down the time frame?
I can't give the exact date, and I would like to be more helpful about the date. And if I knew when Mark Judge worked at the Potomac Safeway, then I would be able to be more helpful in that way. So I'm just using memories of when I got my driver's license. I was 15 at the time, and I did not drive home from that party or to that party. And once I did have my driver's license, I liked to drive myself. So
I assume the legal driving age was 16?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you've talked about attending therapy. In your text to the Washington Post dated 7/6, so that's the very first statement we have from you, you put in there, quote, have therapy records talking about it. I want to make sure I understand that. Did you already have your therapy records at that time?
I had looked at them online to see if they existed, yes.
Okay, so this was something that was available to you via a computer, like a patient portal?
Actually, no, it was in the office of a provider.
Okay.
Time
7/6. That's the very first thing you have to have online. You put in there therapy records. Okay, so this was something that was marriage therapy records to the Washington Post.
I don't remember. I remember summarizing for her what they said. So I'm not quite sure if I actually gave her the record.
Okay. So it's possible that the reporter did not see these notes.
I don't know if I can't recall whether she saw them directly or if I just told her what they said.
Okay. Have you shown them to anyone else besides your counsel?
Just the counsel.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that Brett Kavanaugh's name is not listed in those notes?
His name is not listed in those notes.
Would it also be fair to say that the therapist notes that we've been talking about say that there were 4 boys in the room?
It describes the sexual assault, and it says erroneously by 4 boys. So the therapist got the content of it wrong.
And you corrected that to the Washington Post reporter, correct?
Correct.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Blasey Ford. A lot of people are proud of you today. From a
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Blasey Ford. A lot of people are proud of you today. From a And so, both because making a sincere and thorough investigative effort is such an important consolation to the victim in that circumstance, and because it's what you're obliged to do professionally, sincere and thorough investigation is critical to these claims in a prosecutor's world. It may be the most basic thing that we owe a victim or a witness coming forward, is to make sure that we give them a full, thorough, and sincere investigation. You have met all of the standards of what I might call preliminary credibility with your initial statement. You have vivid, specific, and detailed recollections, something prosecutors look for. Your recollections are consistent with known facts. You made prior consistent statements, something else prosecutors and lawyers look for. You were willing to and did take a lie detector test, and you were willing to testify here. Here you are, subject to professional cross-examination by a prosecutor. So you've met any condition any prosecutor could expect to go forward, and yet there has been no sincere or thorough investigation of your claims. You specifically asked for an FBI investigation, did you not?
You have to say something.
Just say yes.
And are you aware that when the FBI begins investigating, they might find corroborative evidence and they might find exculpatory evidence?
I don't know what exculpatory evidence is.
Not helpful to your recollection and version of events, helpful to the accused.
Understood, yes.
So it could go either way.
Yes.
And you were still not just willing, but insistent that the FBI should investigate your recollection and your claim.
Yes, I feel like I could be more helpful in that, if that was the case, in providing some of the details that maybe people are wanting to know about.
And as we know, they didn't. And I submit that never in the history of background investigations has an investigation not been pursued when new, credible, derogatory information was brought forward about the nominee or the candidate.